Well, welcome everybody. I'm Tom Simonson. I'm the current chair of the club. Rama and Credit Suisse, thank you very much for hosting us. You hosted us fairly recently, I think within the last 12 months, and it's lovely to be back here again. We've got two great speakers tonight on quite an unusual topic for us. It's new to many of us, energy and microfinance, and reaching the bottom of the pyramid. And we're delighted to have Ashish Kumar with us from India, from a firm called Selco. He hails from Bangalore and is in the UK for 12 weeks, based at the LSE, but on a Chevening scholarship from the FCO, the Foreign Office, as one of 12 specially chosen leaders from India to come to the UK for this course. So we're delighted to have you with us, Ashish. We've also got Dr. Philip James from the Department of Energy and Climate Change here in the UK government. And we'll learn more about Philip. I've only just met him today, but he was keen to share what the department are doing. And we felt as a committee it would be quite an interesting kind of juxtaposition of a kind of UK perspective and an Indian subcontinent perspective. So without further ado, Ashish, would you like to come and give us your presentation?
Thanks, Tom, and good evening, everybody. And it's a sort of delight. I'm sort of delighted to be here. Okay, I mean, as they say, as a speaker, I guess one has to provoke the audience, and let me try a bit doing that. When I came to UK, it was for the first time. It was on 26th of September this year, earlier about 6 weeks before. And when I landed on the Heathrow, and I sort of randomly picked up a newspaper. And the first news item is 8 Miliband says that there should be freeze on energy prices. Okay, and I was a little surprised to start with. I said, this is called a developed country, right? I mean, coming from a developing country, energy is in the center stage. And it was just very unusual for somebody who comes from India and I guess from any developing country to see that energy occupies so much of space. And as I sort of realized, and I mean, I have been sort of reading the newspapers, looking at BBC, Sky, or whatever news you call it as, and I think there is no single day which has passed in the last 6 weeks where energy is not in the news, right? But when I sort of started looking into it myself, I mean, when I started, it was sort of pleasant surprise, I guess, but when I started looking into it, I must say that I was a little dismayed. But the kind of debate that is taking place by the media, some of the leaders, and I have sort of no inclination for Labour or Conservative or Liberal Democrat, as you might know, because I don't know the politics of this country. But I mean, it's a sort of disbelief from the sector that I come from, and the kind of argument that is being given to sort of get rid of many stuff, and so that we again go back to fossil or whatever. But then, I don't think you have come to hear me talking about England and its energy policy, and I'm sure Phillips will give a sort of shot at that. But yeah, I mean, we will talk about India and especially the developing countries. So let's see how I can sort of occupy you. The way I have organized my presentation is like this. I will sort of give a brief context of what's happening, some figures about the global numbers, and then we will see how it is linked to microfinance, and that's the reason why all of you are here. And then we will talk about what Selco, the company that I represent, has done over the last 18 odd years to link energy with finance, and that's what we will do. And of course, I think we will have a Q&A session later. Before I start this, and this I ask every time I meet, an occasion like this, how many of you have actually experienced power outages more than a day? Oh wow, it's quite a number. I was actually not expecting. So how many of you have experienced power outage more than 30 days on a continuous basis? No power for 30 days. Wow, so look at the number which is coming down. 60 days. Okay. So yeah. So I mean, I mean, we are in a sort of privileged group where people have experienced power cuts of 1 day, 2 day, or maybe 5 days. There are very few people who have experienced power cut outages more than 30 days. Globally, and this is the number we are talking about. Yeah. 1 billion people do not have access to any form of electricity. Yeah. 500 million of them are in India, the country that I represent. Another 1 billion do not have, have very erratic supply. There is power availability for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. I mean, sometimes there is no power availability for days together, and there is a storm or a rain or something happens, or some politician comes and the power has to be given somewhere else. Then, of course, there is no power for very erratic supply. 50%, more than 50% of people in this world still use biomass for lighting, cooking, for anything which got to do with energy. And what exactly do they do? The women, the girl children, go collect wood, stake, dried leaves, and come back and use it for, lighting up their homes or just getting warm or cooking. So that's what people do, right? The other bit of statistics, which I don't know how much you will be interested in, is this. Energy expenses are actually the second highest expense item in a rural household in India. And I think it's the same all across the world, but in developing countries I'm talking about. I'm not talking of UK, because I have some sense of the proportion of energy spending that happens here in the household. Most of the developing countries, it's actually the second highest expense item after food in any rural household. And it is the third highest expense item in urban India, or except after food and education. So that's the criticality of energy, as you can see, and sort of that will give us a background as to whether we have appropriately looked at it or not. Okay. Some other bits of context. Okay, if this is what is the situation, if these are the numbers, how do people cope? What do people do? The rich. I don't know whether you know, there's something called an inverter, which basically, stores energy whenever electricity is there. It stores energy in battery, and you can use when there is no electricity. So rich people basically fall back on inverter, because they have some access to electricity already, right? And if rich people do not have access to electricity, they basically fall back on gensets, which are run by diesel. Okay, but then what do the poor do? They do not have access to electricity. They can't own gensets. They basically depend on kerosene, candle, biomass, as I said, leaf, wood, whatever. And I guess I don't have to emphasize on the fact that what's the implication of this on income, on education, on health. Especially women and girl child takes a lot of fumes into their nose, into lungs and all that. Of course, if you do not have access to electricity, it becomes completely dark after 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. till it's about 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. So 12 hours, absolutely no work, right? I mean, no productive work, I would say rather. No entertainment, right? So if this is what people do, and of course, children are not able to study, so these are all, I guess, obvious. Now, I sort of never studied economics as seriously as I should have. The nearest to economics is that I'm currently at LSE. I kind of get a guess that maybe we are, all developing countries are basically losing anything between 5 to 10% of their GDP only because of this reason. Okay? Because 500 million of your people are not able to do anything once it is 5 p.m. Okay? So that's what is the scenario. I guess, I hope you have got the point. Now, what does the government do to respond to this situation? As in UK, and I guess governments are same all over. Nuclear power plant, coal-based power plant, gas-based power plant, and bigger the better, right? 1,000 megawatt, 2,000 megawatts, whatever. All those big numbers. But then, is that the solution? Especially given the fact that India is growing, right? Okay, it's not growing as it was growing earlier, but it's still growing at 5%. It was growing at 8-9% about a year or two back. And so many people do not have access to electricity. there is this hunger for energy also in urban areas. So whatever energy is being produced, it actually, and who has the right over that energy? That energy goes to people like me, okay, who are in places like Bangalore or any urban center, or it goes to industries, because industries also need energy, significant amount of energy. So all those power plants that produce big energy, whatever incremental energy is produced will actually go to the people in Bangalore or Delhi or Chennai or wherever, and to industries, whatever, banks included, right? So is that the problem? So how does, and other statistics is the power that is generated, in India, I know in UK I think it's about 8%, there is a distribution loss of about 30 to 40% in transmission. So if you generate power of say 1000 megawatts somewhere, and if you are transporting it to some other place, you are losing 300 to 400 megawatt. You are not losing, I think the transmission T&D loss is about maybe 20%, the rest is actually pilferage. There's a lot of stealing which also happens. This is, I don't know whether it's a typical, I guess, developing country issue. There's a lot of stealing. People just put their hook on the cable line and then they get electricity. So what I'm trying to say is that generation, additional incremental generation is not going to solve the problem of electricity. Okay, the more you generate, it is not essential that whatever you generate will actually get to people who need it the most and who are on top of the mountain, in the middle of the desert, or in the middle of the forest. Yeah, so that's what I think is going through. Generation is not an issue. The issue is actually if they sort out the distribution issue, T&D issue, you have additional 20 to 25% of power. If they come to the level of UK or US, you just have 8% of T&D loss, which actually gives you additional almost 30% power, which might solve a lot of problems. But then we are where we are, right? And so I guess I've told it, right? So basically whatever will be produced will go to rich people, to industries and all that. Then, so what is the solution then? Again, the ideal solution is the generation happens as close to the consumption as possible. Perfect ideal solution is that you actually have a power plant over your head or over your roof, okay, so to say. So if that happens, you're completely free from what happens outside, and you can have whatever power, the needs of electricity you have, you use it. And you are not worried about whether somebody is starting a car, somebody is getting to a bank, or somebody is putting on an AC. So you are completely safe by having the power plant on your head. And that's what is the ideal solution for a situation which is a typical developing country situation where people do not have access to electricity. And I think it will take years and years. We used to blame the Brits always, but I think we have been independent for now 67 years, right? And if I'm right. Yeah, right. I guess we cannot go any longer, blaming the Brits. So I guess it's an internal problem, and for 500 million people to cover, I don't know. How many years will we take, and what will people do till then? Okay. So yeah. So solution is, as I said, decentralized energy, right? And there are many options. I don't think it's only solar which will solve the problem. There is hydro, there is tidal, there is wind. You can theoretically have all this, right? Biomass and solar, of course, right? Now, all of these technologies have their advantages and disadvantages. With solar, what's that? Solar, as I guess you know, the investment per unit of energy is, even now, it's the highest. From all the technology that I have mentioned on the top. If you calculate the energy used, produced, and take the investment, it's still the highest. But it has one unique advantage, right? You can have half a watt of power. You can have 100 watt, you can have 25 watt, you can actually theoretically have half a watt of solar light. Okay? And the other advantage is that you can go on adding solar as you wish. You can have, I mean, theoretically you can have half a watt light, another half a watt light, another half a watt light, another half a watt light, as your need increases or as your affordability increases. That's the unique advantage with solar. Hydro, tidal, wave, wind, biomass, you cannot have power generating stations which are less than a few kilowatts. The smallest that they can go to is few kilowatts. So that's what solar does. Okay, and okay, there is a saying in our company that solar is expensive for rich and cheap for poor. I'll sort of explain you through the economics how it goes. Okay, look at the economics of how a typical household, what a typical household spends on energy. Typical households in India spends about 5 liters of kerosene a month. 2 liters it goes through. There is a system called PDS, which is a public distribution system, where government gives subsidized kerosene. So they get it at anything between 15 to 20 rupees a liter. But then you don't get it always. You have to buy from black market. And black market rate, when I say black market, it's open market. Most of the kerosene which gets into open market is actually the pilfered item which sort of gets into the market, right? So you get it at almost 40-50 rupees a liter, right? Okay, so that's what people do. They also depend on candles. So kerosene cannot take care of everything. So they use anything between 5 to 10 candles. A candle will cost you about 4 rupees. Another unique problem of developing countries is, though we do not have electricity, we have cell phones. And I mean, that's a great thing to happen. It's a very positive thing to happen, and mobile phones actually empowers you a lot. And I will not get into the detail. That's a different story altogether. But I think though 50% people, 40% people do not have access to electricity, I think almost 70 to 80% of that particular population actually has a mobile phone. Yeah, but where do they charge? The mobile phone needs to be charged. So in India there is a word called jugaad. We sort of make our own. We sort of figure it out how to do it. So people basically, whenever they go to any urban center, they take their mobile phone. I don't know whether you have seen it it's in India. I have seen it a lot. In all airports, all railway stations, you have these mobile charging stations. So there are these small mobile charging stations in urban area. In the very small little commercial area where all these rural people will get together, right? And even when I'm saying rural, please don't take it literally. I'm also meaning poor people. Underserved people who do not have access to electricity. And actually there are a lot of them also in urban areas. Typically people who live in slum also do not have access to electricity. Okay, so even urban people who live in slum do not have access to electricity, but do have phone, go to these places and charge their mobile. Per charge, it costs 5 rupees, 5 to 10 rupees. It depends on various factors per charge. And right? Mobile needs to be charged every alternate day. If you are a heavy user, or every day. But okay, generally the rural and underserved people will actually, use as sort of judiciously as it is possible. So they generally would charge at every third day, every fourth day. So what I'm saying is that you still spend about 50 to 80 rupees on just mobile charging. It's a typical household expenditure in a country like India, right? So then what? There are these street hawkers in most developing countries. You have people who sort of sell their wares in the streets, sell vegetables and everything. Again, they need light, right? If they have to do business, they need light. Now, what it means is they basically are dependent on kerosene. And the kerosene charges 15 to 20 rupees a day. Yeah. So are you getting a sense that rural households spend about 200 rupees a month just on lighting? We are not even talking of other things, of cooking, of heating, of anything, right? A street hawker in an urban area spends anything between 500 to 600 rupees a month. And to be honest, I live in a 3 BHK house, which is a 3-bedroom house. I don't pay that much of electricity bill. My electricity bill generally comes to at around 500 odd rupees. Whatever. I have all so-called modern equipments at my home. So-called geysers, refrigerators, ACs, TVs, blah blah, and all that. Can you imagine? Urban poor, urban rich, a fellow like me pays 500, 600 rupees, but a poor person in same urban area pays 600 rupees for a light which lasts for 3 to 4 hours.
Ashish,
Sure.
we've got the point. Give us the solution.
Right.
Keep
Sure.
moving. Keep moving.
Sure. So that's what is happening. Typically, this is what is happening, right? Now, what's the link? The link is this. Current outgo on energy is 150 to 200 rupees a month, right? The investment needed on an alternative or so-called power plant that we are saying is about 10 to 15,000 rupees. Now, these people, what are these people's income? They generally earn about 100 rupees a day. Now, I guess sort of you must have got the link as to why financing is important in this, right? If you have to own something which costs 10 to 15,000 rupees, you have to. But then what's the issue? Energy is actually an utility. It does not, it does not lead to income immediately, additional income immediately. Alright? It's a utility like a house. House is an utility, right? It's an asset. You buy energy you have energy for a very different thing rather than only for income, right? So it has to be need-based, it has to be completely customized, and the moment it is customized or need-based, there are very variable price points. You cannot sell it as a product. There are of course torches and lanterns available which just cost you 100 rupees or 1000 rupees or 1500 rupees. But if you have to customize it a lot, it has to have very, very variable price points, right? Then it does need periodic servicing. It does, okay, I think I have told it this, right? And then the household cash flow is not in the manner in which you use energy, right? The household cash flow, typically if you are a farmer, you get once or twice a year. If you are a daily laborer, you get once a week. If you are so if you are a street hawker, you get it once a day. So you need financing, and this. But then typical microfinance, and if you know, does not operate like this, right? We will come to this later, yeah. And this is the point I am trying to make, that in 1995, when we started Selco, there was no microfinance, and that's why we have modeled it in a different manner. How? What did we do? We sort of started in 1995. There is three miles that we wanted to sort of display, and I guess you can read that the typical perception of people like us is that poor people cannot afford technology, they cannot maintain it, and you cannot establish a sustainable enterprise which sort of provides services to poor people. We sort of tried to display all this, and how. We started providing solar home lighting solutions for underserved communities, and we are structured as a social enterprise. Okay, I know there's many things about going about social enterprise, but there's very little research. But we are structured, and when I say we are structured, we are a for-profit entity, but all our investors, and let me emphasize, all our investors are not-for-profit foundations. So they do not take out any financial returns from the company. There is no dividend. We do make profits though, and we plow it back to research or expansion. Okay. What are the key offerings that we have? I have made the point about all this, right? It is marketed as a utility investment. It is a customized solution, very, very need-based. Selco also is a system integrated rather than a manufacturer to offer best value for money to the customers, right? Then we link financing to investment and household cash flow. The investment, when I am saying, if an underserved household has to buy a solar lighting system, that's an investment for him or her, we link that investment to financing, and we take care of the household cash flow. Means what? So we do not finance ourselves, okay? But critically, the financing has to be flexible, tenure based, and has to have EMIs which are very, very flexible. Because of the reason I said about it being a utility or asset rather than as a product, because there is no cash flow which is generated from solar. And we do take sort of very careful about separating technology and credit risk. As I said, we take complete technology risk, but no credit risk we take. But we do take a little bit of credit risk, and I will take you on. We share the risk perception with MFIs. When a typical financial institution considers a customer risky and we feel that they are not, then we do certain things, and I will come to that in a bit. And we do provide those services. We have staff rather than franchising. Okay. Now, it is a typical reason why users buy solar energy. It's primarily for lighting, for powering their small motors, which is fans, irrigation pumps, and all that stuff. Also, they do. I mean, the people also weavers, the people who weave baskets. They also buy solar home lighting systems so that generates income. What does Silco do in this? Silco demonstrates technology, assesses the needs, develops a product, and partners with financing institution. And once the system is installed, we go on providing servicing. Right? What is the financial institution? Financial institution takes a complete financing risk. Of course, they assess the credit needs of the credit worthiness of the client, and they create the appropriate financial product. And that's where I think this is where I should say that we started working with regional rural banks. When we started in 1995, there were very few microfinance. Microfinance is very, very infancy. It was just in an idea stage, mostly in the country. But we needed financing for our model to succeed, and we sort of started working with regional rural banks. These are state-owned banks which are mandated to finance agriculture and rural development activities in India. And again, they're a very different story. But Karnataka, where we started, happens to have sort of reasonably good RRB infrastructure, and that's how we started there, right? So what do we do about financial risk sharing? As I said, we do financial risk sharing, right? We do provide risk guarantees when a customer is refused financing by a bank, a typical bank, but we believe that the customer is actually a little poorer. I mean, poorer than what the bank would have liked, and that's the reason the bank is refusing to finance. And bank, there are people in India, so if the system is 15,000 rupees, you have to make a down payment of about 2,000 to 3,000 rupees, which is about 10 to 15%. You have to make that. Now there are people in India, almost half the population, or maybe more than that, who cannot make that 1,500 to 2,000 rupees payment at one go. But if you give them an option, and that's what Classic Microfinance has done, if you give them an option, they can pay it over a period. Okay. So we sort of give risk guarantee if we feel that the bank has not financed because of all this reason. Yeah, we put anything between sometimes 20%, sometimes 50%. We put risk guarantee. In cases we provide interest subsidy. We say that okay, if the interest is typically RRB interests are about 12%, reducing balance in these are banks. Okay, but I know it's very high as per UK standard, but that's how in India it's about 10 to 12% is a very reasonable rate of interest. So we do provide sometimes interest subsidy to take care of some of these issues. Sometimes we only guarantee the down payment. We will give a receipt saying that okay, the down payment has been made to us, why did you finance? And down payment we will collect over a period of time. Okay, these are very, very rare cases, but we do this. In exceptional cases, when we think that these are underserved people, we do waive off our own gross margin. Sorry, not gross margin, the net margin. We do not waive off the gross margin. We do waive off the gross margin. So I guess these are some of the things that we do so that the financial institutions feel confident to give financing for solar systems. Right?
Time to wrap up in a few minutes.
Sure. Yeah. So what have we done so far? I mean, this is the snapshot that we have. We have sort of done this much of numbers and all that. The last year we had 40% of our sales through MFIs. I mean, these are famous names in India, but I don't know how much it will ring well here. Myrada, Seva Bank, SKDRDP. Right? Then I sort of thought that I will share a couple of points about the innovative things that we do. Now, I told you about the street hawkers. Typically, street hawkers do not have tenurial rights over where they sell their wares. Now, what do you do in that case? You cannot give them a full solar home lighting solution. So, what we do in that case is we actually promote an entrepreneur in between who buys a big solar panel and very small batteries. The small batteries are charged through solar and are distributed to the solar street hawkers, to the street hawkers in the evening hours when the business starts. And the entrepreneur goes back and collects these batteries, when the business time ends, right? With a service fee. And of course, the entrepreneur basically again takes a loan from a financial institution to do this. and it's a fairly viable business. Okay, so this is what we do, and this gives you a sort of cycle of what exactly. You can see that there's a bank which finances the solar system. There are the small batteries which are being charged, and then this is being taken in a small little auto rickshaw, and then it's distributed to the hawkers. Yeah. Also, we sort of tried to do something similar for children. There have been very sort of strong feelings about education. Now we sort of thought that okay, can the street hawker model be also implemented with the children who are in the school? And there is a scheme called a midday meal scheme in India, wherein children are given lunch to come to school, because for parents it makes sense that there is one less stomach to feed. There's various problems of education sector in India, but they try to. One of the ways in which the country is trying to solve this problem is by giving midday meals, and I learned that they are also trying to do it in UK now. So what we did was, can energy be one other reason for children to come to school? So what we did is that we sort of took inspiration from midday meal scheme, we took inspiration from the solar street light hawker, and we give children small little batteries of the size of mobile phone. Okay, when children comes to school, they bring this mobile phone to the school, put it in charging when they are studying, and when they go back home, they take the battery home to be plugged it in the light. So, and then there is light, right? If the children don't come to school, there is no light back at home. There is complete darkness, right? So this is one of the ways in which we have tried to solve it. And this can also be replicated with households in rural areas through an entrepreneur, and which is again completely sustainable. Okay. Okay. This is how it works. There are small little batteries which are being charged, and then there are the children which are studying. There are the panels which are on the top of the school. This is what we do. Now, toward the end, we started getting recognized the world over and also in India. But I sort of gave you some of the numbers. That 500 million people do not have electricity, but 150,000, yeah, 150,000. We have just done 150,000, right? So what does it mean? It means that people wanted us to scale up. But so there is a debate in Selco about saying, how do we scale up? Can we make Selco big enough, or should we have so many Selcos? And given the cultural diversity of the country, we sort of decided for the later, saying that okay, we need to have big Selcos. Sorry, we don't want to have a big Selco, but we would rather have much smaller Selcos, and so we wanted to incubate people who want to get into energy space, and we sort of want to transfer knowledge, technology, learning, everything, and we haven't had a smooth run. We have had our ups and downs, and significant ups and downs all across, right? And that's what we are trying to do. And lastly, and that's the point I guess I wanted to make, and we sort of wanted to hear, and probably we can discuss. Financing is very critical for access to energy. Okay, how can financials see this as a priority, which they haven't seen it so far, and that's what we believe, right? But then, because it's a need-based asset financing, you need complete flexibility. Which, microfinance started with flexibility, but I think along the way it has lost that, and microfinance, I guess, is much more standardized rather than the typical financial institution. So, can microfinance do it? And can we actually have a middle ground where microfinance can get into energy in a significant way and can play a great role in energy access of the world? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ashish, thank you very much. What a dynamic delivery. We've all learned something about what it's like to live in India with power outages and batteries and so on. So let me welcome Dr. Philip James. And Philip, if you'd like to introduce yourself, just again, thank you. And then we'll have questions afterwards.
Right, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to come along no problem. And speak to you all tonight. I head up the analysis team for the International Climate Fund in Department for Energy and Climate Change. This is a shared fund between the International Climate Development Ministry and the Energy and Climate Change Ministry. I'm probably not going to disappoint you by saying I'm not going to touch energy policy. I've actively avoided it through my career. My career is all based on development and climate change. It is not based on UK energy policy. So, climate change, the latest IPCC report said warming was unequivocal. Since the 1950s, the changes have been unprecedented in the climate, and human influence on that climate system is clear. From this, there's basically two things to bear in mind. It's vital that we put countries on a pathway to low carbon development, that's carbon neutral or at least low carbon energy access, and we all must share in this effort. It's not just developed countries, and it's not just developing countries, and it's not just the public sector, and it's not just the private sector, it's every single one of us. On that note, sustainable energy access and sustainable clean energy access and poverty alleviation and the fight against climate change are inextricably linked. So what's the UK government decided to do about this? In 2010, we committed some money to the International Climate Fund predecessor, and since then we've made a commitment in the UK to spend £4.48 billion to 2016 on clean energy, so in the fight against climate change, in the fight against poverty, and to address biodiversity. That's a slightly smaller proportion. So the ICF basically has a balanced allocation between adaptation and low carbon development. So that's essentially adapting to the effects of climate change and mitigating the effects. I'll concentrate on mitigating the effects of climate change because that's particularly probably where we're interested in terms of the energy sphere. So within the ICF, I think there's the International Climate Fund. That is, I think there's a natural tension, which actually I also believe is the strength of the programme. That you need to invest a lot of money to create transformation change, but by the same time you also need to deal with the short-term poverty alleviation problems. And so you're talking kerosene, you're talking diesel generation, etc. All are very expensive, very dirty, but there are clean ways to do it. It's fair to say that the number of projects from DFID that support MicroFinance as well. So they are projects that support the scale up of solar. They are projects that support agriculture and changes in agriculture. The ICF portfolio itself, just a small sample of the projects that we've so far developed, we've so far spent or committed to spend only, and I say only around £1.7 billion of that £4.48 billion that we've committed so far to spend. But those few projects have so far are estimated over their lifetime, and I'm an economist so I deal with the estimations, are giving 6.5 million people clean access to energy and helping about 20 million people cope with the effects of climate change. However, the levels of investment to deliver what is the general target of a 2-degree world cannot be delivered by the public sector alone. There's a commitment, and you might be aware that there's big UNFCCC, so the UN Convention, Framework Convention on Climate Change conference going on at the moment. So most of my colleagues are over in Warsaw negotiating the next basically Kyoto Protocol, which we're hoping to come into force in 2020 and to be agreed in 2015 in Paris. However, to deliver that 2-degree world, which we're all negotiating over currently, public finance won't be enough. We've made a commitment in Copenhagen back in 2009 to scale up private and public finance to £100 billion per year from 2020. And for this, we need the private sector and individuals to get involved as well. So the key here is to recognise that climate change offers real opportunities within to drive innovation, to drive new ideas for action, and create new partnerships between public and private sector, and between microfinance institutions, large financial institutions. So a number of our projects are very, very big projects. We have one called, which we nicknamed CP3. It's not such a great play on words, but Climate Public-Private Partnerships Programme, which is a massive investment fund. So it brings on board pension funds, etc., which then work through sub-funds, which then work through, again, minor companies and minor financial institutions, which to get the financing out of the door to the poorest individuals at concessionary rates. And that's a requirement of overseas development aid, that we provide concessional finance. So we provide finance below the market rates of 10, 12, 14, 20% in some cases, particularly for energy efficiency measures. They're seen exceptionally risky by banks, and they don't want to touch them. So we try, I say try, but we do try to put in guarantees. We try and put in credit lines to actually assist these banks to gain that experience within energy efficiency. So the CP3 partnership is expected that the projects that that fund is financing to generate more than 7,000 megawatts of clean and reliable energy, both in Asia and Africa. So many of the poorest depend on sort of their livelihoods, which are susceptible to climate change. And the REACT programme aims to stimulate private sector investment in developing and delivering low-cost clean energy. And that programme itself has so far installed 14 megawatts equivalent of off-grid clean electricity, such as these solar panels we've seen today. And Akash mentioned that solar is the highest per unit cost. How do you get that unit cost down? How do you make that unit cost per megawatt actually affordable to the poor? What you do, you scale it up. You bring in things such as mini grids. So these are grids of solar panels which are connected, and you share the electricity. So you don't have the transmission line problems. You decentralise your electricity system, completely opposite to what we've done in the UK, which is centralise, centralise, centralise. We're suggesting decentralise the system so you don't have your transmission issues. And we've got projects which fund that type of thing as well. The increasing energy access in rural Africa projects, the EEP program, supports innovation, which is really, really interesting, and somewhere that certainly microfinance institutions should be able to access, which provides grants to kickstart projects which help the use of clean, affordable and sustainable energy for populations in rural Africa. So far, that's helped. I expect to help about 7,000, just over 7,000 households. It's a very, very small program, and should allow about 30,000 plus people to obtain access to new and improved low clean energy by providing grants and upfront financing, basically taking the risk out of the first mover advantage associated with energy in this space. So the other way we try and operate is via resource-based financing mechanisms. This is where you don't provide upfront financing, but you say if you produce so many megawatts of energy, we will guarantee, we will give you a bonus for producing that number of megawatts of energy. It's been shown that actually you can use financial institutions to actually link these payments, because you've got a guarantee or near guaranteed flow of payments for it. You can actually take the risk out of lending to these institutions. And for example, here we've included the installations of off-grid PV in Benin, PV in Bangladesh, biogas in Vietnam, market creation activities in other countries such as Rwanda. It's not fair to say that that we operate only through bilateral channels, or certainly small channels, as I've suggested. UK government cannot operate at a tiny, minute level. The resources that are available just don't allow that. So we also operate through large multilateral channels. The major climate one being the climate investment funds, which the UK committed around £1 billion to as well, which help 48 developing countries, projects across 48 developing countries, to install things such as mini-grids, such as large CSP, so concentrated solar power, etc. So just to sum up, the climate change challenge, as is seen, is significant, but it does offer real opportunities and a leapfrog, in my opinion, to change how energy is distributed and how energy is actually supplied to households. Much like the mobile phone has offered a leapfrog from the landline to the mobile phone, I think climate change offers the same. It's crucial that the public sector and the private sector work together to mobilise sufficient finance in this area. And I think the takeaway is it's climate change, whether it's real or it's not, is not part of my job. I'm not a scientist. I'm an economist. It doesn't matter. The key is we can use it to provide clean energy access and reliable energy access for those in the poorest of our society. So that's a very quick summary. I'm happy to take questions and talk afterwards, but I was told I'd have a few minutes. So thank you very much.
Question to Ashish. I guess most of your clients are from rural areas, and how do you find them, or how do they find you?
We have our own branches all across the, mostly the district headquarters or block headquarters, as you would like to call them as, and we do whatever a rural marketeer would do. I mean, we go to fairs, we do these advertisements. We are not on TV, but so the other thing that we use very critically is do sample installations in religious institutions. Church, mosque. So all a rural marketeer would do to spread their product and services, that we continue to focus on. We are not in a lot of the local language media. We have advertisements, and banks are one of the major channels of advertising. When we started, we did spend a lot of money in promotion, but currently roughly about 40 to 50% of our customers actually come through referrals of banks, and that's what happens generally.
Okay. It's a more generic question, Ashish. I think we generally consider clean water, security, primary schooling, healthcare in civilized countries, not in the United States, of course, to be something that people should have irrespective of whether they can afford it. They're a right. Is energy like that, or is it something that people should pay for?
Okay, I have recognized that, and internally we do admit that energy is definitely not in the first 3 or 4 priorities of any households. And I personally, if you ask me, though I work in Selco, I don't think energy is a right. Okay, because civilizations have actually existed and lived. Energy in the sense, fire may be okay, but electricity in a form, I think many of us have lived, many civilizations have lived without electricity. And in fact, there are, I guess, even in India, and I don't know the world figures, I think still there are 10 to 15% people who are actually living without any electricity, even not kerosene, not candle, anything like that, right? So I don't think it's a right. I'm sure education is a much higher right, health is a much higher right, water is a much higher right. So if you ask me, yes, energy, people need to pay for access to energy. No, it should not be free.
My question is for Ashish. Until the Chinese got into the market, the supply side was dominated by the companies in the West. Companies like Siemens and GE. Their technology is expensive, and very poor people in the developing countries can't really afford it without any subsidy. How is that these big companies, or other thing is that One of the things you have missed out is the recurring cost of replacing the batteries, which is very, very expensive. How come these big companies have never researched into producing lower cost batteries or smaller size batteries, like what has happened in the mobile phone technology? Why is that there has been no investment by the larger companies into bringing down the cost of these units?
I mean, we know, right? It's a typical developing country problem. Yeah. And so, I mean, you can ask that why is there no research into, drugs for malaria? I mean, it's the same reason. Yeah. So, this is a product or service which is needed by the poor, who have very limited paying capacity. So, I guess that's one of the major reasons. But having said that, there is research which is going on and all that. See, for example, the battery that we have in mobile, I mean, they have got down to it's now very energy intensive, but still the costs are very higher. The moment you are talking of for solar system, the cost of a battery is very high. The other point that I want to make is that I don't think, see, if the companies are not doing anything, so what do the poor people do? What do the poor people or underserved people who do not have access to electricity do? I mean, they have to fall back on something like this. And Selco, see, for first 15 years of Selco's existence, there was completely no subsidy on any solar system. It's only in 2010 that the government came in giving subsidies. So what I'm saying is that if you are providing the right product or a service, whatever might be the cost, if you are providing value, I think poor have the ability and the will to pay. I think only the people like, and again, I don't know whether it's a provocative statement, people like us do not have the ability to pay. People like us, complain when the prices are raised by 5%, 10%, 15%, we come to the road. I mean, it happens in India. I mean, I don't think it's a typical UK problem. But yeah, I mean, that's what I think is the scenario, and that's the perspective that with which we have to see. So I think poor have the, please don't say that poor need subsidy. I don't think poor need subsidy. It is the rich who need subsidy.
Last question. Okay, I think it's interesting from a microfinance point of view. Most of us, we think of microfinance as a loan for a productive purpose, to run a business. This is a loan to defray a cost that or a loan to buy an asset from which you can defray an otherwise regular expense and therefore pay back. And it seems like you tapped into something, and I'm sure there are other companies doing similar. And this is an innovative thing, but you seem to be a market leader, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. And would you like to tell us about the next month's event?
Right, we'll be
Can we have this slide?
we'll be going live and sending it out to you tomorrow or thereafter. So it's the Thursday, the 12th of December, and we are looking at building resilience and looking at the value chain and microfinance, the linkages between those, based on research done by World Vision and Vision Fund in Tanzania. And they're very excited with what is happening with their research project and want to share that with you. So that's building resilience and reducing risk, implementing microfinance amongst other poverty alleviation programs. And we'll send you out an email so you can register to attend that too.
Thank you very much for coming.